Now I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker for today's webinar, Deep from the DSG Global Academy. Deep is an expert in international shipping and logistics with over 25 years of experience helping businesses navigate the complexities of shipping products overseas. He has worked with numerous companies across various industries, assisting them in developing efficient and cost-effective shipping strategies. Deep is passionate about sharing his knowledge and helping businesses succeed in global marketplace, and we are honored to have him with us here today to share his insights and expertise on this important topic. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Deep to begin the presentation. Deep, the floor is yours.
Wade, thank you very much. I appreciate that, those kind words. Good morning, everyone. My name is Deep Sengupta, as Wade mentioned, and I'm with DSG Global. Just a couple of, just a very quick introduction to what DSG Global is. We're a training company in this field of international trade compliance and worldwide rules. We've got very strong Western US ties. My first home in the States when I moved 25 years ago was in Seattle, and now I'm based in San Francisco Bay Area, but we have team members around the country. And prior to starting DSG Global, I managed FedEx's consulting practice. So I can literally say I've seen most of the cases and exports to different countries. That was a great learning experience. Friends, when Busara asked me to speak on this subject of considerations in shipping your product worldwide, I was wondering, do I go very high level or do I go into the weeds? So if it's very high level, just focus on these four things: identifying your customer, getting your export documentation right, figuring out the correct transportation provider, and don't be surprised with any customs duties. Very simple, right? But the truth is, I'll be doing you a disservice if I didn't talk about, all the nitty-gritties that are involved. So here are two top 10 lists. On the left is really what your top 10 export considerations should be, and also what the top 10 legal considerations are that you need to be aware of. Even though you're not a lawyer and you're your own legal team, you need to be aware of this because people usually come to me when they're in deep trouble, no pun intended. So what I'm going to do, it's going to be very fast-paced, but give you a lot of this information. And if anyone has any questions or would like to pose questions to me after this call, kind of anonymously, confidentially, I'm delighted to address that as well. Wade, I'm sure in the presentation he sends you would have my email address. So let's focus on the top export considerations first. First, we start with the benefits of global markets. Why would you even want to worry about overseas? If your market's here, your audience, your customers are here, frankly, you don't need to worry about overseas markets. But selling globally is much easier nowadays than it's ever been. You can communicate, you can get paid, you can transport your goods quicker. You have US offices, government offices around the world who can help you. And what we've seen is that jobs that are supported by exports pay more, and companies who are limited by domestic customers now have worldwide markets and more revenue. So that's really the attraction of exporting: increasing your company size, getting more money, and not putting your eggs all in one basket. Because even if you have competition in the United States, maybe not all your competition is exporting around the world. And a lot of people probably tell you, more so in industrialized products and medicine and uh, other lines of business, that US origin products are really coveted and appreciated around the world for the stamp of quality. So what should you first do? Develop your export strategy. And this is almost like your GPS before you start exporting, figuring out the strategy. When people come to me and many other government agencies, we already put companies in different buckets. Are they new to export? Are they export ready? Are they experienced exporters, right? So ask yourself that question. Are you ready to export? And which are the products that you want to export? Which are the countries or regions around the world you want to target? What's your customer profile? How are you going to get into those countries? What's your distribution channel? And for every country, are there any cultural differences? I know India, you're going to have a tough time selling beef. Turkey has some restrictions on citrus imports. Some other countries, may ban wheat or rice. So find out and research your destination country. And what is your export sales price going to be? Are you just going to market and price it just right? Or are you going to keep a buffer for any transportation costs, any unforeseen circumstances, any customs duties and taxes that you weren't aware of? Once you finish your export plan, develop a marketing plan. And there are many resources that your friends at WUSATA can put you in touch with, including the Foreign Agricultural Service, the US Commercial Service, that help you research foreign markets, as well as finding distributors and partners in foreign markets. And they can really make your life a lot simpler finding your end customer. As I mentioned earlier, there's many resources for export advice. But what I didn't mention here is your freight forwarder. Your freight forwarder and your carrier can really help you with the transportation and the shipping advice. But just to read the slide, there's WUSATA, the US Commercial Service, the Foreign Agricultural Service, that can help you with any nuances for exports, as well as other private sector service providers, such as DSG Global can always advise you based on our experience. Methods and channels really talk about finding local distributors. Finding local distributors is actually the path of least resistance if you don't know how to enter a market. If you just want to put your little toe into the market to test the waters, going through a distributor or an agent is really easy because they know what documentation is needed, which government agencies you need licenses or approvals from. They know which ports are closest to the cities and markets you want to reach. So finding a local agent or a distributor based on your size is always a great idea. And I know WUSATA and the US Commercial Service can help you all find those local buyers and also the distributors. Then the question, once you've done your initial research, which was the first circle that I had, is know your customer, figure out who you want to ship to, where you want to ship to. Before shipping your product, you need to do a little research on what documentation is needed before your products can sell in a foreign country. Imagine you reversed the role and you are trying to import into the United States. There are many rules For instance, the Food and Drug Administration, the USDA, Fish and Wildlife, they all have restrictions and requirements on imported goods. The Federal Trade Commission has rules on how your product should be marked and labeled. So similarly, when you are shipping around the world, you've got to know what the requirements are. Suppose you want to ship to Brazil, to China, to the European Union. All of these countries have their respective government agencies that may have jurisdiction depending upon which product family your product is under. Quebec, the province in Canada, requires that any markings on your package also be in French Canadian. So there are all these requirements that you need to research ahead of time. And many times you may need to tell your customer that just hold on a second, because I don't want to ship right away and then have my goods held up at the FedEx station in Abu Dhabi because it can't get into the local grocery store because of all these legal restrictions. So find out the requirements ahead of time, and all the resources I mentioned to you can help you find what the foreign government requirements are. And then figure out what your shipping options are. Sorry, a little more about export documentation. The various type of documentation you would definitely need. The basic types are a commercial invoice. The certificate of origin is also something many countries around the world require. If you're shipping multiple items in your package, a packing list may be required. And many times countries, they trust the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration of the United States, and they may ask you for a FDA's certificate of free sale, which means that your product was safe enough to sell in the United States, according to the FDA. So many other countries around the world take it as a kind of a reciprocal stamp of quality. Also, find out about the overseas countries' labeling and packaging requirements. Once you do that, you can start looking for a transportation company. If it's a really small package, you've got excellent express courier options, the FedEx, the DHLs, the UPSs. When you go slightly larger, then you're looking at a pallet size, either in a plane or ocean, or maybe in a container, depending upon the size and how urgent the shipment is. If the shipment is not urgent, then you can go through your products are not perishable, then you could even consider shipping via ocean in terms of a container. Regarding food products, what I've seen is really important to know the temperature control of the products, humidity or moisture control, so it doesn't affect, the food products, and also to keep your products safe. Would there be any commingling, any risk of contamination, or pilferage? So these are all concerns that you need to address with your transportation company so that they can give you options. And they say, well, at an extra fee, we'll give you a refund that is temperature controlled, so on and so forth. I've seen that if it's a small shipment, and let's say you're a smaller company and you're shipping to an end consumer, don't ignore the US Postal Service. Many times you say Postal Service, wow, you may not think they're as reliable as a DHL, FedEx, or UPS, but you'll be surprised. Many times the Postal Service uses these express companies for shipping the goods in express next day or same in a couple of days, 2 or 3 day of option. And what I've seen is foreign customs agencies, they scrutinize courier shipments a lot more than the regular postal shipments. So if you're shipping supplements or food supplements or sometimes some food products, there'll be less questions asked if it actually went through the postal system than if it came through the courier, right? Because they know courier is high value and they've got special rules, a little more exacting rules for courier shipments. So, uh, I've seen far more stoppages and goods held up in the courier mode than just the US Postal Service. So, just a little guidance there. I'm also going to talk about this on the legal top 10 list, but find out when you're shipping a product, establish with your foreign agent or distributor or customer who is responsible for various aspects of the transaction. Your product, let's say it's beef jerky, may cost, let's say, $100 for the package, but who pays for transportation? Who pays for refrigeration or moving the container once it's arrived at the foreign port? Who pays for the custom broker? Who pays for inland freight? All of these, who pays for warehousing? All of these additional costs need to be addressed, or they're going to be hidden costs that eat your profit. So these are known as international commercial terms, and there's a whole set of 11 international commercial terms, such as Ex Works, FOB, CIF. You may have heard of these terms, DDP. So figure out which one works best for you so that you're not holding the bag for any unforeseen expenses down the road. Also, the United States has spoilt us in a sense because um, the United States, Europe, and many other industrialized countries typically have a lower customs duty rate. And it makes perfect sense because the lower the customs duty rate that these countries have adopted, they've seen that it spurs and encourages international trade. There's been research about this and papers written, but many other developing countries, or poorer countries, if you will, they rely on customs duties. So what they've done is they've increased the rates of customs duties to pay for their government, and it makes the cost of doing business, for example, in India, in Brazil, and many other South American or Asian countries to be shocking. So what? The VAT and the customs duty is so high, but it is what it is. So the best thing I tell my customers is find out ahead of time what your customs duties and any other import taxes would be, and include language in your sales contract that you're going to pass that on to the customer, right? Because you don't want to be shipping to, let's say, Germany, and then find out that you had to pay a 20% VAT, right? That just means all your profits are gone. And the people who can help you with this, there's many resources and websites out there that can help you find the customs duty rate. But your freight forwarder is really your hands on the ground who should have access to this information. And the way you do it is you give them your harmonized code. It's usually a 10-digit code that defines your product. And then around the world, they'll say, oh, this is your harmonized code. Let's say it's coffee beans, right? In that case, for these countries, this is the HS. Um, this is the HS code, which is going to be similar for the first 6 digits. And this is your customs duty rate. So you're forewarned, and you can include these estimates in your quote to the customer. As I said earlier, get your quotes right, um, decide on the correct Incoterms so you cover all the components of the cost, and figure out how you're going to get paid. You know, back in the day, I've got a young daughter, and I was just watching Beauty and the Beast, and suddenly the Beauty's father, remember, he was a merchant, and his goods get lost at sea, and he becomes a pauper. So there are many stories like that. But in this day and age, having insurance for your product, and getting a payment through a letter of credit or through an escrow, is probably the way to go, so that after you send the shipment, you're not just hoping that you get paid, and there's some assurance from your bank and the receivers or the buyer's bank. And there's also many government agencies in the United States that offer you export financing to help with your working capital and your working expenses, um, until your payment from the customer arrives. And that is the Exim Bank, and the Small Business Administration also offers loans to help exporters such as yourself. Friends, those are the main export related considerations that I tell my customers about. But the next 10 are the legal issues where customers actively reach out to me after the transaction and say, oops, now what? So it always helps to be aware of these 10 legal risks before the transaction so you can prepare and plan for them better. It's listed right here, but so one is the contract. Hopefully you have a contract. Intellectual property protection, product compliance and registration with the local country rules, because every country has different rules based on their circumstances, their cultural sensitivity, their priorities, their local competition. Import rules, export rules talks about US rules, and the US rules are very stringent for export to certain unfriendly countries or certain sensitive technology. I know that these are all food products, but still, it's important to let what our United States export controls are. Incoterms, I already spoke about it before. Anti-bribery. The US actively monitors and enforces anti-bribery provisions. Payment terms, dispute resolution, and political risk. Let's go into each one of them. So the first is the contract. Many, many times I see, the buyer and the seller may have amnesia after the sale is concluded, and the buyer conveniently forgets what they had promised. So always try to document in a contract when the title passes, any issues that could be unexpected, force majeure, especially after COVID-19, any warranty issues, put down all the unforeseen risks that could happen, God forbid, in the contract. So should it happen, you know how to deal with it. Obviously, a contract should have the basic terms. What is your product? What is the sales price? When is payment due? And what if payment isn't due? Is there either a legal recourse or a non-legal recourse, such as arbitration or mediation? Intellectual property right protection is a very, very big consideration around the world. You've got basmati rice and texmati. You've got any product that you think is going to be a hit. in another country is a target for a counterfeit good, stealing your technology and your know-how. So find out if the local country has intellectual property protection, which mostly it does, but find out how to register your trademark, your patent uh, in the foreign country. And your US commercial service and your US government representatives in those countries, like the Foreign Agricultural Service counterparts, can also help you and advise on how you should register your trademark and get it licensed. Product compliance. Many countries have very, very strict rules for quarantine and food products. Obviously, right? Because their uh, population, their citizens are going to be consuming these food products. So find out what tests you need to make, what inspections, what phytosanitary conditions and requirements and standards you need to meet. I could tell you about it, but then it would be a very long presentation today. So today is high level, but having product compliance and registering with these phytosanitary standards is a topic in and of itself. So I didn't cover it in much detail today. When you import into a foreign country, these are, sorry, these are the most important topics. One is, remember that the Foreign Customs Agency wants to extract some money from you. It's called customs duties. And finding the correct harmonized code, you can find out ahead of time what the duty rate is. Let's say in India, it's 15%. 15%, and let's take a product. Okay, let's say chicken jerky, right? Now, your 15% is your customs duty rate, but it's applied on the price of the good. And many distributors in developing countries will tell you, can you please reduce the value? And you say, why? You say, oh, well, that way we'll pay less customs duty. Well, that's illegal for them. And you'll be complicit in this conspiracy of defrauding the government's revenue if you went along with it. So please be strict and say, you know what, we don't want to do any hanky panky. This is the value, and it is what it is, right? The customs duty. So regarding value, there's 6 different valuation methods. The most important and widely used is the sales price or the transaction value method. If you don't have a sales price, or the importer and the exporter are related, then there are 5 other valuation methods, which is valuation of identical goods, value of a similar good, something called a deductive value, which is the sales price minus advertising expenses, something known as computed value, which in tax language is also known as cost plus method, which is your cost of manufacture plus a certain profit margin. And the sixth and the last method is any other uh, method of pricing as per generally accepted accounting principles. So getting your valuation correct can really help manage your customs duties legally. Many countries also want you to mark the country of origin either through a certificate or on the packaging itself. This way, the consumers know from which country it is and they're not fooled. Um, Also, check if there's any free trade agreements. The United States has free trade agreements known as FTAs with over 20 countries: Canada, Mexico. It used to be called NAFTA, now it's USMCA. Chile, Jordan, Singapore, Australia, so a whole bunch of countries, and goods that are produced in either of these countries or mined or grown, such as agricultural products, get duty-free treatment between these two countries. So if you're shipping to Australia, you'd better be using the free trade agreement. That way you don't pay any customs duty. So if you were to figure out which are my top destination markets, please include those countries with whom the US has a free trade agreement already with. I've already covered import requirements and documentation. Now, I have seen many, many goods held up at the FedEx, UPS, DHL warehouses because their information is not accurate, complete, and legible. So I'm going to be sending these slides through Wusata to y'all. So basically, complete all the necessary documents, keep the information consistent across documents, provide a good description, and always provide your contact phone number either on this end or that side of the border so that the customs agencies can call for a clarification. You know, if they don't know how to reach you, your goods are just going to be stored in the cage. Now, US export rules is against four types of products. One is sensitive technology, which food products is not. Sensitive technology also covers certain biologics, but that's for chemical and biological weapons. So bacteria, malaria. So food products isn't covered, but US export controls also prohibit certain countries from receiving your goods. Uh, you know, Cuba, North Korea, Syria, Iran, right? That's just a few. Also, there's a list of people on the denied party list or the restricted party lists that you cannot ship to because they've got a history of um, wrongdoing against the United States government. So every now and then you may see in the paper that this many Chinese or Russian entities have been sanctioned, right? So how do you find out about these sanctions? Well, there is, if you look up restricted parties or um, it's called the Consolidated Screening List. There's a government website on trade.gov. And if you put in the name of your foreign party you're dealing with, it'll tell you whether your foreign party is on that list or not. And if it is, you can't do business with them. Let me just assure you that usually these companies on the list, are bad guys, so they're not, chances that a food distributor out of Bangladesh would be on this list is very, very, very unlikely, unless that entity is also involved in some other hanky-panky, which came to the attention of the US government. Um, and the main government agency that controls exports is called the Bureau of Industry and Security. It's under the Commerce Department. And their job is to keep the most sensitive goods out of the most dangerous hands. So you've got missiles, nuclear, chemical, biological weapons, now supercomputing, advanced semiconductors, airplane parts, stuff like that. So it's like really high tech that we don't want to get in the hands of our enemies or people who might use it against the US strategic interests. So what I tell all my clients, whether they ship food products or not, is always find out which agency has jurisdiction. Your products are just covered by the Commerce Department, regular, plain vanilla, legitimate exports. But the State Department covers arms and ammunition. So find out, just uh, Where is it going? The ultimate destination can't be an embargoed country. Who will receive it? The end user can't be a sanctioned or a restricted entity. And especially when you're doing business with uh, middlemen or distributors, find out if they're on any sanction list, if other parts of their business is beyond food products, right? I covered Incoterms earlier. Please know your Incoterms ahead of time so that there's no hidden cost or responsibility that might fall on your plate. There's 11 different Incoterms. I should have included the chart, but if you just do a Google search for Incoterms, you'll see many images of from your destination to the foreign destination, who is responsible for every single step along the way and which Incoterm is applicable. You know, if you do business with government agencies or quasi-government agencies around the world, be sure not to bribe foreign government officials for obtaining or retaining business. Bribe is not just a payment, it's also anything with a cash value, with a corrupt motive, seeking to influence that foreign government official's actions in your favor. It could be travel to Disneyland, a scholarship for their son or daughter at a US, so it's a very wide definition of anything of value. So remember that if you try to get a foreign government contract through an illegal manner, the US Department of Justice will definitely come after you. And they've been increasingly vigilant. I remember 20 years ago when, it was okay to give educational payments to overseas entities like Enron used to categorize its expenses. But nowadays, the US government has realized that, bribery of any nature, cuts both ways and affects US business too. Because you know, um, if a foreign official takes a bribe, it makes the US looks bad. Other government, foreign entities will also try to bribe, and we're not competing on a level playing field. Apart from the clear morality of this immorality of this wrongdoing. Um, find out the payment terms ahead of time. So, as I mentioned earlier, a letter of credit or going through your bank, do credit checks. So, know who you're dealing with and try to minimize the risk of non payment to the best you can. It's great to be trusting, but, trust but verify. Assume that a dispute may occur. It happens between family members, it happens between friends, it happens between long term associates. Decide where you want the dispute resolved, either through the courts or a better effective means is arbitration or non traditional dispute resolution like mediation. Friends, that in a nutshell was all the considerations, export, shipping, and legal considerations when you start embarking on your worldwide journey. I wish you all the very best. And like I mentioned, I'm delighted to take questions, but even after the call, if y'all want to reach out with any questions, I'm very happy to provide a complimentary consultation. Uh, Wade, I'm delighted if any questions came through.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a couple of questions, and keep in mind, everybody, if you do have any questions, please post them in the chat, and that way we can get them answered. But the first one coming through, there's actually three from CJ, but the first one is, are there any guides or online resources that go into detailed step-by-step for each of the agenda items?
So let me go back to the agenda items. Yeah. So now, if you look at the top export considerations, well, I created this list, but if you look at and Wade, feel free to jump in from a
Yeah.
WUSATA perspective, but the Foreign Agricultural Service, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, and the USDA, Department of Agriculture, as well as the US Commercial Service, all have a lot of country specific information on their website. On the right hand side, the top legal considerations, well, I mean, I came up with this list based on my experience, but I'm sure if you identify the country and you talk about, let's say, IPR protection in China, you'll find a lot of information. Again, the US Commercial Service will have the more general legal advice. So that's what I'd, and I'm, any input, Wade, from
Yeah.
WUSATA perspective?
And I'll also add to that you will be doing 3 other webinars that are diving deeper, no pun intended, into some of the topics that you've discussed today. So we have import export documentation coming up next week, international translation and logistics the following week, and then strategies for minimizing customs duties and delays, which I think would go into some more detailed analysis of some of the things that you've discussed today. The second question that CJ has is, why am I getting charged duties from USA to Canada if there's a free trade agreement between them?
You know, the first question is your product eligible for the US Canada Mexico Free Trade Agreement? It would be eligible if it was grown in North America, if you made it in North America from mostly North American content. But if your product was assembled in the United States or processed in the United States and you did not meet the threshold, let's say 50% of sales price, then it would not be eligible. Now, even if your product is eligible, have you submitted the, it's called the USMCA, formerly known as the NAFTA certificate, along with your products, and informed your customs broker that your products are eligible for 0% duty? So these
CJ,
are
if
all,
you want to hold on real quick, CJ, if you want to come off of mute too, because he is saying that it is grown and manufactured in the USA.
well, in that case, I'm delighted to speak with CJ offline and look at, ask some questions about the product. I need to, based on the HTS code, find out the rule of origin for that HS code under the NAFTA agreement, which is now USMCA. And it could be
Hi, Deep.
either,
Can you?
hi,
Oh, I was messing with my mic. Thank you for the presentation. This is a great overview on all the stuff that we should take into consideration. I think you hit it on the head where I don't think I was printing out that USMCA certificate that UPS provided. I don't think we've ever attached it to any of our shipments, so that might be one reason why they charge duties to it. Would that be a possibility?
oh, definitely. So, CJ, well, thanks for the kind words. Um, you know, um, in the old NAFTA during President
Yeah.
Trump's time, you needed to submit a certificate, NAFTA certificate in a particular format. When USMCA, the new name, was enacted, there's no particular format, but you just need to include 10 data elements. It could be on your letterhead. So if you send me an email or send an email to WUSATA, um, then I'm very happy to send you the 10 elements that need to be involved. But I've got some good news for you. Sorry, it sounded ominous. Um, the USMCA does allow you to go back and claim a duty refund, you know, uh, almost going back a year. So without spending too much time if you want to go and tell your broker that these products should have been covered under this USMCA origin letter, then you could get your duties reversed.
Oh, that's good to know. Because I remember the reason why we stopped trying to export to Canada from the United States was because, for example, we're trying to sell on Amazon Canada, ship to their warehouses, right? And then the duties that they attach to those exports to Canada, it just made it not profitable. I mean, it just made the margins super razor thin, where we're like, you know, if you factor in the cost of our time, it's net negative. So I mean, we felt like, oh, but then knowing now that we should be, I guess, exempt from those duties, I guess that does make us reconsider.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. But you know, what I would say is defining what those duties are. Now,
Yeah.
customs duties are exempt, but Canada has a complex system of GST and PST and HGST, depending upon the province you're going to. So we'd have to ask Amazon which were the duties they're talking about. If it's Canadian customs duties, we could get it back. But if
Oh,
it's, let's say, going into British Columbia and you're paying their, their provincial tax, that might be another story.
got it. Okay. Thank you for that.
Of course. Thanks for your question.
Deep, CJ also had another question on harmonized codes. Are they universal? For example, beef jerky harmonized code, is it the same in Canada as in Japan?
That's a great question. You know, I normally go into more depth, but we'll go into it during our topic on customs duties. So the United States has a 10-digit harmonized code. Most countries have 10-digit. Some countries may have 8 digits. And the harmonized codes are harmonized for the first 6 digits around the world. The remaining 4 digits, depending upon the country. For instance, in Saudi Arabia, the last 4 digits for wine might be red wine and white wine, right? But in France, you'll have Chenin Blanc, you'll have Sauvignon Blanc, you'll have, Petit Syrah, so depending upon the country, there'll be further detail. So that answers the question that only the first 6 digits will be the same around the world. But you know what? If you're shipping around the world, it makes sense to find out what the local country's HS code is and mention it on your invoice. That way, if the local customs broker sees your invoice and they only recognize the first 6 digits, the duty rates might be different at the last 4-digit level. And guess what they're going to pick? They're going to pick the one with
The
the
most
highest rate of
expensive.
duty.
Right.
So it always helps to, and there's a resource out there. It's called FedEx it's a paid service called World Tariff. So for $7 a query, you could look it up. But there's other resources out there as well for finding your
Got it.
country-specific harmonized code.
Got it. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, Deep, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. If anybody does have any questions, if you want to use the raise hand feature, we can take it live because we do have a couple more minutes. If not, as I did mention.
I'm sorry. One last question. Would you be providing your contact information so if we want to follow up and see if maybe there's opportunity to consult or something like that? Oh, there it is.
Absolutely. And, delighted to offer a free consultation. Any questions you have. Yeah.
Awesome. And CJ, we will be sending out the presentation and the recording after the call today for everybody's reference. So as we did mention, next week we will have another webinar hosted by Deep going into important export documentation topics, and then he will be also hosting 2 other presentations the sequential weeks afterwards, diving deep into other topics that are relative to exporting. So Deep, thank you so much for your time today. It was a really pleasure having you here and sharing all of your wealth of knowledge with us.
My pleasure. And Wade, thanks to you and Wusara for having me on and giving me this opportunity to speak with all of you today. Bye, everyone.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody. I hope to see you all next week. Thank you so much.